Hi everyone, I'm Shan-Yuan Teng, PhD student from the University of Chicago, and today I'm very happy to present our work collaborated with Katie Wu, Jacqueline Chen, and my advisor Pedro Lopes. Here, the user is in VR with our haptic device worn on her arm. And the user is playing a several-hour-long VR game. She can feel all sorts of haptic feedback, like the sense of touch and forces. But here, with many of haptic researchers here, when you hear me talking about feeling haptics and several hours, you might think something must be wrong here. Shouldn't the device have run out of battery already? And this is what my talk is about. When we look into haptic devices that generates the sense of pressure, friction, and forces, the actuators they require so much power that they would only last for minutes if powered by a battery. We could put more batteries to last longer, but that also puts more weight on the user's body and make the device larger. And that is not desirable for mobile VR that we just want to move around freely. On the contrary, if we look at sensors, they can be super power efficient, run in nanowatts, and even powered by harvesting energy from the environment or from the user. In fact, some researchers have used kinetic harvesting to power input devices. And we are inspired by this work and ask, how can we use similar ideas to prolong experiences when using haptic devices? So our approach is to have a haptic device that harvests power from the movement of the user in VR. But if we just put this energy harvester on the user's body, the user will wonder, why does every move now feel so hard? And we propose to design VR that adapts so that the experience fits the sensation. And I'll show you how it works in this example, VR survival game. So when a haptic device has no power, VR will render a tide. And after the wave has flushed over the island, the user starts swimming for their survival. And when the user swims, she feels a resistive force offered by our device, which at the same time, the device harvests energy from the user's movements. After 1 minute, our haptic device has enough power and the VR can adapt again. This time, VR renders this island for the user to explore. Our device contains a custom clutch that can disconnect the user's arm to the energy harvester. When it unclutches, the user will not feel resistive force anymore. Now, VR has the power and can render other haptic interactions. For example, when the user punches the palm tree, a vibration motor in her palm will vibrate, using the power just previously harvested from the user. Now the user picks up the coconut and brings it to the rock in order to smash it for hydration. And our device provides a sense of pushback by electrically stimulating on the user's muscle. The VR can always go back to harvesting interactions when needed, and this can go on and on. So here we show this rich haptics power at infinitum by designing VR that dynamically changes to conceal the fact that the device sometimes needs to harvest energy from the user. Let me tell you how we made this. I'll briefly show you some key challenges here. First, all haptics are powered by a kinetic harvester instead of charging a battery ahead. We use a DC motor that harvests elbow movements into electricity. And this electricity is then stored into various supercapacitors and electrolytic capacitors. they can charge up much faster than lithium batteries. With this, we can boot up a Bluetooth-enabled microcontroller with 1 minute of harvesting. And these capacitors also power other haptic actuators. With 1 ton of movements harvested, they can power 1 or more times of haptic actuation. We will open source the schematics on our lab website if you want to build your own harvesting haptics device. The second challenge is how to switch off the kinetic harvester when we don't need it. The key is to design a kind of clutch that can connect the harvester on demand. We designed this clutch utilizing an electropermanent magnet to minimize power consumption. When the gear is engaged, the elbow movement is connecting to the harvester. Thus, the device will harvest energy from the user's movements. And the magnet keeps the gear engaged by repelling it. Now, if we have enough power, we can apply an electric pulse to the magnet. Look at the south and north pole now. It will change its polarity. And now it will unplug this gear out. And therefore, the device does not harvest anymore. Well, if the power has dropped low on our device, the device can apply an opposite pulse. And look at the polarity now. It will change again and push the gear in. So the device can harvest from the user's movement again, and the user will feel the resistive force. Now, the challenge is, how do we design VR that can toggle harvesting too? Especially, how to transit from harvesting interactions in VR seamlessly. The first strategy is harvesting involving scene transition. We've seen this at the beginning, and this is suitable to harvest lots of power. But what if we only need a bit of power right before some interaction? We propose another strategy, which is to harvest just in time before the haptics is needed. For example, here the user intends to grab this virtual battery on the ground in this survival game, but VR puts a crab next to it. Now, when the user tries to grab the battery, the big crab jumps onto the user's arm and doesn't want to let go. And the user shakes her arm while the device harvests the energy from the movement. And after harvesting, the device has the power to render more haptic feedback, for example, buzzing and electrotactile. To understand how users actually feel, we conducted a user study. To understand, first, if it really conceals harvesting for the user. And second, if our approach obviously is making the experience longer and is more physically demanding, and do the benefits outcome these limitations? We compared our approach to controllers only, which emulates the condition without power for haptics. And in this almost 20 minutes VR, we found that none of the participants realized that the device was harvesting movements before we revealed at the end of the study. And participants rated our approach provided higher realism despite additional fatigue and longer playtime. Finally, can this extend to other types of experiences? We especially showcase some other long VR experiences. I've shown you an example of open world games. This can also apply to rhythm games similar to Beat Saber, where the saber can become heavier when it needs to harvest energy to render force feedback impacts when the user hits the cubes. This can also be suitable for fitness applications, where resistive force on the arm can provide training and haptics can be used when the user receives some rewards. Lastly, Our approach can be applied to other body joints too. Putting the device on the leg, the user can enjoy a running game when it runs through different terrains and with haptic feedback. And the device can harvest energy when the user passes through water. So to conclude, haptics integrated with harvesting into VR is completely different from haptics powered by batteries. It enables haptics anytime. Traditionally, to enjoy haptic experiences, mobile haptic devices must be charged for some time. And with our approach, haptic experiences can be readily available, as the device harvests energy from the user without their knowing. And moreover, for traditional wearable haptic devices, they will run out of battery at some point. And with our approach, haptic experience can be prolonged while the user makes the device alive again through their movement. Now, let me tell you what I'm so interested in this. So in fact, this is part of my PhD thesis topic, which I'm currently exploring. That is how to integrate rich haptics into our life. Both personal computing and more immersive media like VR or AR, they advance towards mobile. But haptics are just no more than vibrations. I examined the roadblocks that prevent rich haptics from entering our life, and found that first they all abstract all our everyday tasks. And that led to my past research, Touch and Fold, which is a haptic device that folds away when you interact with everyday objects. This increases the mobility of haptic devices. Now, the other problem is that haptic devices are all tethered to large power sources and cannot support long time of use. And this is what I explored in this project by combining energy harvesting to increase the availability of haptic devices. And altogether, I hope to fit rich haptics into our everyday life. With that, I want to give big thanks to my co-authors. Katie Wu, who's here with us in VR all the time, and she's also here in person, and Jacqueline Chen and my advisor, Pedro Lopes. Thank you for listening. I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you for a great talk. I'm Takuya from the University of Tokyo. It really changed how I view haptic devices, and without increasing them, would just really increase burden for maintaining them. It really changed my mind for that. My question is there's a lot of VR devices, all of the headset and controllers and all of these feedback devices and these stuff. And I was wondering if we design the VR interaction in a certain way, swimming all the time, whatever, until what we'll be able to maintain? Will we be able to maintain controllers or VR headset, or I wouldn't know the energy order that can be maintained through these VR realistic situations.
Yeah, very good point. So we choose to harvest kinetic energy from the user's movement because that actually can provide a large source of energy. And as a first prototype that we made, we can provide around 0.1 watts of power, and that could power some haptic actuators. But in fact, our movement actually provides several watts of power. So if we optimize this energy harvester's efficiency or add more reducing gears to make it harvest more power, then I feel it could be possible to also power other devices. Well, for example, eventually we want to power the headsets too.
Yeah, thank you. That's quite a lot, and I'm really excited. Thank you.
Thank you, Shane. This is Andrea from KAIST. So I have a question. Did you perhaps investigate when you designed the device when actually users do need power at most? So typical example, I reach out my VR headset and it's off. I forgot to charge it, or it's been unused for a few days, so it's not charged to get started with. Mm-hmm. So in your case, for example, you might end up always with the training phase of a similar scenario in which you need to charge it first. So I was just wondering, when you motivated this scenario, did you figure it out when actually charging is needed? Not in between, but do you need it, for example, at first, even before when you just start?
You're asking when?
From the user point of view,
yeah.
When does most likely need to be charged the haptic experience? At first, for example, because they're already, we battery?
I see. I see. So in our design, it depends on the current power on the device. If the power is already run out, then the VR has to respond to let the user charge. But if still has some power, then VR can render something and prepare for some harvesting events later on. So it really depends on. The idea is to check the power first and then decide what kind of interactions is suitable to run.
Thank you.
Hi, Shan-Yuan.
Hi.
I'm Sylvie from UCLA, and I really like this work. Like you can enable a longer experience without breaking the immersion. So my question is, who came up with the idea of the pink crowd? Okay, just kidding. So I'm trying to ask about the energy efficiency.
Yep.
So we noticed that we have to swing to gain the power. And I wonder, for example, in the survival game, how frequently do I need to swing to the power?
Right. Actually, we intentionally to design the energy storage to be small because we want to investigate what happened when the device run out of power. And in our study, the user charge up the device within 1 minute and then explore 5 minutes of interaction on an island, and then they will roll again to another island.
That's impressive. Thank you.